Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your hosts, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome to Hope After Addiction. We are so happy that you've joined us today. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I can't complain. I am getting ready for I don't know when you're watching this, but it's around fall break.
My
and
favorite.
So, yeah, we're gearing up for fall break, and we're surprising the kids. Hopefully they don't listen to the podcast.
I know.
No, I'm just kidding. It's next week. So I think it'll be aired after
That's
this.
true.
But yeah, we're surprising the kids.
So exciting.
We're going on a Disney cruise.
Oh.
So we're so excited.
I bet.
We're going to wake them up the morning of,
Oh.
and we're going to go. So
I look forward to that kind of stuff.
I know.
So much fun.
I know. We've done it before, not a cruise, but we've done it before. We woken them up and surprised them going somewhere, and it's just so much fun. So we're going to do it again.
Do you tell when you get there or on the way?
Well, we tell them, we wake them up, and then we just tell them what we're doing. Yeah, we're going on a cruise.
I love that.
Or the last time was Disney, the
Yeah.
actual Disney World. But
It's going to be so much fun.
I know. I can't wait to tell y'all. We'll show pics.
Oh, yeah.
Carlos.
So sweet.
Yeah. So we're excited. But everything good with you?
Yeah, everything's good.
Good.
Just loving on that little munchkin.
I can't.
Both little munchkins. Big munchkins.
Big munchkin. They're so
really
cute.
big munchkins.
We always love a good big munch.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Sweet.
today we're going to be talking about overcoming the overwhelming and whatever that looks like for you. A lot of times in life, especially our listeners, are dealing with a lot of overwhelming feelings of despair, of frustration, of a lot of different emotions that just can seem to really just kind of overwhelm us. Just a lot of emotions that come with loving a loved one who is addicted, who's been addicted in that season of life. But it doesn't have to be addiction.
No.
I mean, there's so many things, even for me, when I'm kind of far removed from that season of my life, there's still things in life where if I lay down my head at night, I'm just so overwhelmed.
Yes.
And just different things, raising children,
Amen.
just like different things that are so overwhelming that the enemy can use to really shift your focus away from God. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to overcome those overwhelming emotions. And more specifically, I think we will discuss, I think anything that we say can be used in your life to whatever you're dealing with. But most of the people that are listening are dealing with addiction and their loved ones addicted. So that's kind of, I think, where we'll land a lot too. So
For sure. I always find it ironic, and even in the addiction realm, but it seems like it's all or it's nothing. Do you find that in life that it's literally like everything's happening at once or everything is just
when it rains, it
smooth
pours.
rolling? Yes.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true. Like it's true. It's like, why at one time?
Yeah.
But I guess it gives you a really clean break once that stuff's kind of, settled. But
Yeah.
what are the things, I was trying to think back to like my most overwhelming thoughts and like situations walking through addiction. What were your top ones, would you say?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say my most overwhelming feeling is lonely. I was really lonely in that time.
That's a good one.
And so every time I laid my head down, I'm just like, I just feel like nobody understands me. And the overwhelming feeling of anger. I had a lot of anger. Bitterness was a big one. Very bitter at Adam, just for putting us in that situation. I would say, bitter, anger, kind of together, lonely, and just, I'm trying to think of the word to put it in, but just the feeling of, will it ever be the same? I don't know how to put that into a word.
I think that's perfect though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
Will it ever be the same?
Yeah, and those are so good because it's the even lonely, overwhelming, but it's all consuming. And that feeling of loneliness, because not only are you lonely because you're separated from the one that you love, but you're lonely in the world because you feel like nobody else understands. And so I know my biggest one, I think, was the unknown future.
Yeah.
And constantly trying to figure it out, like what the future look like, what 3 months look like, what, like you said, an unknown, like, will things ever look the same? 5 years from now, what will that look like? And it wasn't for me to decide, but it was all consuming for me. You know, do I stay or do I go? Which I know you contemplated with that. That was all consuming, overwhelming. And it does, God ask us just to take care of today, and tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yeah. Don't worry about tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of our biggest lessons is going back to that. It's like just today. But there's so many overwhelming thoughts. The finances were a big one, you know, and in reality, I was already doing it on my own anyways, because he was spending it on drugs. So I was like, you know,
Still in
just,
the same boat.
coming back to that, the reality, but it can be so all consuming.
Overwhelming.
And
Super
overwhelming. Where you can't even get a positive thought in because all you're thinking about is the right here, the right now, the years from now, the moments from now, what's next. So
Yeah, I had a talk actually with Eli last night about overwhelming thoughts.
Yeah. Did
it's
you?
So funny that we had already discussed, which I wasn't thinking about it, but he was just sitting down. We have our time at night where we put all electronics away and just really talk about what's going on in his little head. And so, but last night we got on the topic of COVID. We're not getting political here, but we got on topic of COVID and what that looked like for him back when he was a kindergartner. And because he was asking me, did anybody die from COVID? I was like, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And we talked about that and what that looked like, you know, for him going to school with a mask on and all the things. It was crazy time in the world. And he just goes, so what if something like another disease happens? Like, what are we going to do?
No.
And he just started getting a little overwhelmed with it. And I just brought back to his attention all of the fun times we had in quarantine.
Yeah.
And I said that about God, you know, we don't need to worry about tomorrow or what could happen because God says, you know, he's going to take care of it. And if another virus comes around and we have another quarantine 2.0, I said, we will make the most of it and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes.
And so I said, we don't have to worry and be overwhelmed with our feelings with what's going to happen tomorrow. And I was telling that just kind of goes with anything.
Yep.
You know, we don't have to worry about what happens if this, you know, so.
Because God has it. And it's hard in the midst, you know, and that's like hindsight. It's so even you and I can be like, that was, it was a precious time where we had a lot of lessons, but in the moment, you know, it's hard. And it's so fun to have those to look back and see, like with, even with COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with COVID, even with Adam, you know, Adam's addiction and all the things we don't, you know, we just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it's easy to say.
It is.
It's easy to say. I will admit, but
it's,
I mean, it's a good reminder
to
kind of shift your focus back to where it needs to be. We're not saying you're not going to worry about what happens with your money or what happens with your marriage or what happens with whatever.
Yeah.
But if Chelsea and I can sit here and you're listening to this podcast, somehow shift your focus back to your Heavenly Father instead of your circumstances, then that's what this is about. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a special thing. And like Katie and I say a lot of times, like these, when we're preparing for these speak to us just as much as they speak to y'all, because it reminds us, even in the midst of whatever Katie and I may be going through sitting here, to not be overwhelmed. It reminds us of the tools that we need also in life to remember that God's in control and we're not.
Yeah.
So I remember an image that I saw going through like the fit of everything, and it was like a boat and a person in a boat, and the person in the water was pulling them. Well, the person in the boat was theoretically like the addict, and they were sitting there just dry and happy, and then we're pulling them along drowning. And that's what, when I was thinking about this, the overwhelming, that's what I felt like, because I felt like I was drowning and he was sitting up in the boat just like in the sunshine, sunbathing, you know. And so that was the imagery of what if, and it gets heavy, but it's also when we take our eyes off of, like Katie and I say a lot, self-care and God, we do start drowning. And I think about Peter in the Bible. So it's the craziest when he takes his eyes off of Jesus and starts worrying and getting overwhelmed with the seas and the reality of like, can I really walk on water? Yeah. That's when he begins to sink.
Yeah, that's not happening.
You know? Yeah. And like so often we doubt, like, God, you can't do this. God, you're not big enough to bring us out of this. You're not big enough to restore our marriage. So we begin to drown because we doubt what God can do.
Yeah. In the Bible, there in 2 Corinthians, there's a whole section about God comforting us, and it's 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. I'm going to read that. It says, "Blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. He comforts us all in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God." Mm-hmm. And so we talk a lot about sharing your story and the power that can have on somebody who is feeling super overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to reiterate it and challenge you as our listeners who are going through it, that you do have a story, mm-hmm. and that somebody who might be coming to mind to you right now might need to hear your story. And you might not be through it yet. And so maybe it just takes a little bit of time before you share it, and that's okay. But I think that there is power in being able to shift, God using you to shift somebody's focus back to Jesus because of your past, and whatever you've been through. And so sharing it, one, I feel like has been healing for me over the years. It's been healing for me to be able to share it of what God has done, because it always kind of shifts my focus back to Jesus whenever I share my story. But also comforts those who might have gone through it as well, and helps with those overwhelming feelings for them. Saying, because my number one, when I first said, she asked me what my number one thing was, my number one overwhelming feeling was loneliness. Yeah. And I didn't have anybody back then, to share with me what they've been through. It was very taboo, which I still feel like it is, but I definitely think it's becoming more and more of something that's front and center, people talking about on the news and everything. So it's not as taboo, but it's still a lonely place. For sure. So I think that sharing it kind of helps with that loneliness.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because, we talk about light and dark, and if we don't share our story and we sit in the overwhelming, all-consuming thoughts, that gives the enemy so much room. It's his playground.
It did too.
And I always say an idle mind is the devil's playground, and it is so true. But once you begin to share and open up, that is when the light it comes in and the darkness is drowned out, and you have support. You have people praying for you. You are able to just process. We talk about counseling, all of those things to be able to drown out the darkness, because those feelings, overwhelming, all-consuming, lonely, it's just pure darkness is what it feels like. And so once you're able to share and also turn your eyes back to Jesus, that's when he meets you in the dark. That's when he meets you in those moments at 2 a.m. in the morning when you literally feel more alone than you ever have in your entire life. Or when you have a friend reach out at the most opportune times when you need it the most. That's when it's like, God, you see me right now. But it takes you being open and vulnerable to bring somebody into that overwhelming hole that you're in. And just that light just permeates it immediately. And it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah, I remember. It's so weird when you're talking about this. I just remember those feelings of being super overwhelmed, nobody knowing what Adam was going through. So it was only me and Adam. And then I think his family found out, but I still felt kind of lonely in that moment. But once I started telling a few of my friends and my family, there was almost like a burden lifted off of me. And I can still see myself back then. I remember going to like Einstein Brothers and just sitting down with my mom and dad and chatting about, everything, and going to have like an intervention talk with Adam. And I just remember thinking that weight was lifted off, and I was almost like smiling.
Yeah. Empowered.
And yes. And I was like, this is so weird. I would have thought it was the opposite. That's why you keep it to yourself, because you're ashamed. And I don't know. I just don't want anybody to know. But then once you tell people, and then I'm not talking about screaming it from the rooftops like Chelsea and I.
Right. No, we're not asking for that. Yeah.
But it may come to that. But I am talking about just letting a few people in, and that you trust. And I did. I trusted my family and probably 2 of my friends. And That's all it takes for just that burden, so that they can help carry the burden along with you, so you're not so overwhelmed with what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and there's power. And I'll say this, as a profession, I do hair, and I was working all the time then, just trying to drown out everything that was happening. But the loneliness of that, of going in and putting on a smile when my entire world was falling apart. But when I began to open up to specific people that I knew that I could trust in there, that's when God began to work, because I would have clients be like, you know what, we've actually been through the same thing. And that was 8 years ago, and I still have people check in on me. I still have people say that I'm praying for you and we're proud of you guys. And but there was so much power in opening that, because there was nothing more overwhelming than trying to go to work every day through tears with a smile on my face, because I wasn't fooling anybody in all reality, you know. But once you brought that in, the light was just, it was powerful and special, because that's the memories I have today, are those conversations that I'll never forget.
I love that. You have anything else?
I would just say, and I've said it on here before, probably a while back, but I had a friend tell me one day, 10 minutes by 10 minutes. That's all you can do. And it may sometimes 1 minute by 1 minute. So it's one task at a time, one thought at a time, and one day at a time. That's all you can do. That's all God asks us to do. And just remember that He's walked before us. He goes before us. You're not alone. And so in those moments when you're worrying about tomorrow, when you're worried about next week, when you're worried about the next year, what's that going to look like? Remember that today is all I can do. And if all I can handle is 10 minutes by 10 minutes, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's good enough. And grace yourself in that. It's good enough. And God will carry you through the rest.
I love that. And we talk a lot about self-care, and you mentioned it just a minute ago. And we'll just reiterate it, because honestly, you lose yourself in this process of dealing with a loved one who's addicted, because you're so focused on them that you will get lost if you don't make a conscious effort to focus on yourself too. It might seem selfish in the moment, but if you don't do that, those overwhelming feelings, because that's all you're thinking about, will creep in, and then it's just like a cycle. And so we're here to say, what is it that you can do to kind of shift your focus, one, back on Jesus, right? So that might be getting in the Word a little bit more. That might be going to listen to podcasts. Thank you. That might be, telling a friend or two to kind of shift your focus back on what's right. But it also might be doing something like going to get your hair done, going to get your nails done, where you're just focused on you for a little bit. And it seems crazy, but the amount of people that just don't wash their hair because they're not even thinking, it's kind of like, those mamas who just had babies, like they're so focused on their babies that they have to kind of take a step back and be like, what can I do for myself to kind of help myself heal? That's like a physical healing. This is kind of an emotional healing as well. What can you do to allow yourself to emotionally heal from what you're dealing with, so that you can fix your eyes on Jesus?
You're like a baby deer.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, because you've taken care of somebody else for so long in the pain that you're having to relearn, how do I love myself again? Or relearn, how does God love me? And the best thing is simplify, simplify, simplify. Everything out of your life when you're overwhelmed, simplify everything that isn't necessary.
That's good.
And learn to re-love you.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, we hope that we have encouraged you a little bit to shift your focus on the overwhelming and fix your eyes on Jesus. And He can overcome anything. He is the ultimate overcomer. And it's many examples of that here in the Bible and in our life. And we know that He's going to do the same in yours. So we hope that you felt encouraged today in that. And we hope that you have a great week. And if you are finding this on any of our social media platforms, make sure you just share that. That's how we get the word out. If you're finding this on YouTube, thank you so much for listening and watching. Make sure you hit a like and subscribe so you can see when we release our next one next week. And we hope that you have a blessed day, and we'll see you then. Bye.